Hi, welcome all. We'll just wait for a couple of minutes before we start. I'm just waiting for people to join in. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our virtual Thought Leadership Monthly Meet of October 2020. At the start, I would like to say that we are very pleased that IIM Bangalore has agreed to be our sponsor for this monthly meet. Before I introduce you to the speakers and what we are going to really talk about today, I'll just quickly take you through, for some of you who may be joining from other places or who are new to NHRD, let me just explain to you about our chapter. So we have about 2,500 members, and as you know that we have programs for professionals, academia, and students. As you know, we do thought leadership meets and cluster meets on a monthly basis. We have various learning programs. We have the HR showcase, which I'll talk about. We also have webinars and tweet chats and summer internship mela for the students, etc. And we've been awarded the Best Chapter Award for 3 consecutive years. Just a quick idea about our membership. So we, NHRD India, we have about 13,000 members across 30 chapters. In Bangalore itself, we have 2,500 members. Once you become a member, your membership is valid across all the chapters in India. Wanted to just highlight, if you have an annual silver or gold membership, you can upgrade it to the lifetime membership by paying the difference. And it's also possible for many of the organization and institutions to look at annual institutional membership. For more details, you can write to the email address that we have put up over here, and also visit our nhdbangalore.com website. So before we go on to the next item on the agenda, I would also like to let you know that we have a very unique event which is going live on the 31st of October at 5 p.m. This is an event with our winners of the startup category in our HR showcase last year. And so you would be able to hear Mr. Saurabhjit Chatterjee and Mr. Vaidyanathan Ramalingam in discussion with Shivani Dimri. And they will talk about how their journey has been from inception to implementation. So please do join us this Saturday, 31st at 5 p.m. As all of you know, that the NHRD Bangalore chapter, we have our annual event in November or December, and this year we have it on the 27th and 28th of November. The theme is reimagining HR, pivoting to the new normal. This year, of course, it is a virtual event, and it is a national event, so we will be looking at participants from all across India. We will have knowledge sessions and learning sessions. And also along with that, we will have our major focus, which is our HR showcase, where corporates, startups, academia, and CSR will showcase their best HR practices. And also it is a competition, so we will also be giving awards to the people who are sharing some of the best practices. So please save the date, and we will be sending out communication very soon for registrations. So please save these dates and look out for communication from us. So welcome again. And I would like to hand over now to our sponsor, Mr. Ganapati from IIM Bangalore.
Thank you.
Yes, please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Pallavi. So on behalf of IIM Bangalore and my colleagues, I would like to take the next 10 minutes, talk a little bit about IIM Bangalore and what we do, and especially about our PGPEM program, right? To begin with, the PGPM program that we are talking about is a 2-year weekend program that IMB has started some 20 years back. So coming to the vision of IMB, our vision is to be a globally renowned academic institution fostering excellence in management, innovation, entrepreneurship for business, government, and society. We have 3 areas. We have degree granting programs. There are 5 programs: Doctor in Philosophy, PhD, MBA, PhD, PGP, EPGP, which is a 1-year MBA, 2-year MBA, which I'm going to talk after a few minutes. And then, of course, executive education program, where we do short duration and long duration program, and MOOCs. MOOCs is our online platform, which we started 3 years back. So this is about the MOOCs journey, which has more than 10 lakh enrollments, and we do a lot of program. In today's newspaper, you would have shared that we are going to start a lot of programs in MOOCs in the area of health, healthcare, MSME, and research areas. Coming to the faculty, we have more than 110 faculties across the 10 areas, that is strategy, production, center of public policy, etc., which is rated very well. This slide is about the rankings. We are ranked number 2 in India, and of course in the FT rankings and QS rankings, we are rated very high. Each of our programs is rated very high. The MOOCs program is rated top 2.
1 second, and we are not able to see your screen. I'm sorry.
Okay. So so the 2-year postgraduate program is a 2-year weekend MBA for working professionals, ranked very well, ranked number 1 in India and 36 globally. This program was started in 1998, and we have more than 1,600 alums doing this program. This program is designed for working mid-career and senior executives from across industries. Normally, when we started this program, 8 to 10 corporates had sponsored their executives to do this program. But today, a lot of sponsorship has moved to reimbursement. So a lot of senior people are reimbursing their program fees. This is targeted for those who wanted to continue working and upgrade their managerial skill. It's a master's program. It's an MBA. As you all know, that IMB has become a university, and this program is a master's program. So what are the program highlights? So in the year 1, we have 4 quarters. Classes will happen on weekends, that is on Fridays, second half, and on Saturdays. So there is 10 weekend of classes, and examinations are held on the 11th weekend. But when we say weekend examination, there is a continuous evaluation that happens. So, there is a spot quiz that's happening. There is participation in the class, the case study methodology which we utilize. So all this takes 750 contact hours, which you need to come down to the campus to pursue your academic education. So what are the list of subjects? The list of core subjects that happen in the first year are as follows. It can come across business law, corporate strategy, decision science, operations, etc. In the second year, we also have 4 quarters, but the electives are 12 in number. So it also has an exchange program, which is a full-term exchange across our partner universities or a GNAM. So the areas of electives that happen are 13 electives across the PGPM programs. So there's a flexibility in the second year. You can reduce the workload. One key thing is you don't have the campus placements for this program. What are the program highlights that I have shared till now? It's an exclusive program with 75 students. 13 core courses happen in the first year and 12 electives happen in the second year. There is internationalization of the program. Full term exchange happens, or a GNAM partnership of 32 universities. So there is 8 quarters with 750 contact hours. Choice of electives agrees across the programs. There are comprehensive projects and there is diversity in the class. What do we mean by diversity? Here we mean not only a male-female diversity, but also engineer versus non-engineers. The minimum age the people come in is at the age of 26, but we also have people coming with 54 years and an average of 31 years of work experience. People do come from across sectors, banks, engineering, defense, ITES and others. Here others mean they come from entrepreneurship or they come from NGOs or government organizations. Coming to the admission criteria, this is an important slide that you see. The eligibility criteria for this program is a bachelor's degree, which is an equivalent of 50%, minimum 4 years of work experience, and you need to write the CAT, GRE, GMAT or IMB test. So you will be called in for an interview, and if you write an IMB test, this test will happen on 7th February 2021. And what is the selection criteria? Selection criteria depends upon your past performance, work experience, special achievements, test scores, and in interviews and your written ability test. Since we are a university, the SC/ST norms will apply and as per the Government of India norms. So financial aid exists for this program. There is a scholarship which is merit-based and need-based. And also there is an education loan where leading banks provide you collateral-free loans. There are very senior alums in this organization. Many of them are at middle and senior levels. Like you see in the screen, there are few MDs of the organizations. You see Mustafa, which is a founder of an ID Foods. So a lot of entrepreneurs do come. A lot of faculties do come. After pursuing this program, they do their PhD program and then continue to teach. And of course, a whole lot of senior and middle level executives start doing this program. This screen is also important. The program fee is around 19 lakhs, spread over 2 years, 8 quarters. And then the application timeline, it's already started. It's an online application you have to pursue. You have to go to our website. The application closes on January 18th, 5 p.m. And the IMB test is on February 7, 2021. Contact informations is also there on the slide, the marketing information, phone numbers, WhatsApp support is also provided. And of course, we share, this is the website of the program, right? imb.ac.in/program/PGPM. For any queries, definitely you can write to us, we will answer. And with this, I would like to hand over the slide back to Pallavi to take over.
Thanks, Ganpati. And I'm sure, like all IMB programs, this is also going to be a good success. Without further ado, I will just share my screen with all of you so that I can introduce all of you to our speakers. So we have, so today's topic is the NHRD Thought Leadership Monthly Meet is on Agile Leadership, Engagement and New Way of Working. And we're very glad to have Tarken and Stephen Hart with us. Both of them have taken the time to be with us. They are based in the US. And so good morning to both of you. and looking forward to listening to both of you. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Sudhir Banerjee, who is the head of GDS ABP, and who has joined us in our monthly meet today, for introducing us to Wayne and Stephen, and for really encouraging us to have this session. So over to you, Wayne.
Thank you. Is everybody seeing the screen?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay. Share screen, sorry about that. Okay.
There we go.
Cool.
Yes, you can.
All right. Pallavi, you can hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Wayne, you might want to mute while I introduce. And
Yes. It just, I'm having some internet connection problems, so if you see me kind of freezing here and not do anything, that's why, but hopefully we'll be okay.
Okay. All right. If you can mute your mic for now, that would be wonderful.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Pallavi, so much, and thank you so much for having us at your special session today. We are thrilled to be here. It is a cold, miserable, very rainy day here in Philadelphia, and so it's a good thing to be inside the house and to be spending some time with all of you. We very much appreciate it. Thank you. So thanks also for attending this presentation today and for giving us this opportunity to be with you. Talking about our Agile HR Leadership Program. I'm planning to give you a bit of a context for the program, and then I'll invite Wayne in as well to talk a little bit more about some of the details about it. But I'd like to start by telling you a bit of a brief story about how the program we'll talk about today came together. So you might want to move on the slides there. Thank you. The date was December the 6th, 2018. And I invited Wayne to be a guest speaker at one of my classes at the University of Pennsylvania that I teach on human capital strategy. And Wayne led the students that night through a very interactive exercise, teaching them the principles of Agile that he had identified, and gave them a very good strategic context for how this might work. So as you can see from this picture, I'm kind of standing away looking in on the classes that's going on. I observed a few things that were going on with my students. First, there was a level of energy that I had not seen before. They were interacting and engaged actively in open discussion and exploring options. Second, they were being, what I would say, very playful, enjoying inventing approaches and exploring solutions and being quite innovative. And finally, there was a strong commitment to action because they were on the same page and shared the same vision. They were very eager to implement solutions. Now, since I grew up in England, like many of you, I'm a big fan of cricket. Maybe you follow the Royal Challengers in Bangalore, but I just happened to watch recently the Netflix documentary featuring a season with the Mumbai Indians following their championship win. Now, as I watched the documentary, I was reminded of that evening in my class with Wayne in October 2018. I realized that implementing HR principles to solve strategic HR issues is very similar to the way the teams in the IPL's T20 tournament approach and prepare for their next tournament challenge. And some of the similarities to that include creating a shared vision, sharing responsibilities for the results, making a commitment to action, experimenting with combinations of players' abilities in response to the environment and the competition that they face, being flexible and adaptive to change when it's needed, reflecting on the outcomes of games and making the necessary adjustments, employing the best of everyone's talent and capabilities, and realizing that you win or lose as a team. You lead with passion, building trust and confidence in the players, and you practice open communication and the focus on an outcome that is greater than any of the individual's players. So these are also the things that our program in Agile HR Leadership aspires to do. We work with HR leaders within the context of their own work and drive their desire to be more effective and responsive to the needs of their organizations. However, it turns out that what I observed and experienced in my class on December 6, 2018, is not necessarily the reality within the HR community at large. The reality is that HR is often notoriously slow and sometimes reluctant to take the strategic lead in their organizations, adopting a more passive role, focusing more on the transactional functions that are so necessary but are not sufficient to help HR become a strategic leader for the organization. And it's been our experience that we've encountered quite a range of engagement among HR teams we've worked with over the last 3 years. HR leaders are often handicapped by antiquated policies, procedures, and technology. They lack development of their leaders and are not focused on the needs of the whole organization. At their very worst, there is no strategic engagement at all, which leads to an unclear understanding of the role that HR plays in the organization. In some organizations, we see better practices and more engagement at a strategic level. We see in those organizations a clear view that HR is engaged in helping the organization to meet its challenges and has some role in partnership at the C-suite level to drive critical human capital and HR initiatives, and to be recognized as an important function. And in the very best of cases, we see that HR leaders are fully integrated and immersed in the strategic imperatives of their organization. They are recognized as a true partner, not only at the C-suite level, but across the entire enterprise. So no matter where your organization might be currently, our program is custom designed to meet you where you are and move you to where you would like to be, or to sustain you if you are already among the best of the best. Now, no matter where you are currently, there are at least 3 things we see that you should expect to have to deal with as an HR leader in today's current and post-COVID environment. First, expect further disruption to be the new normal. Second, be able to respond to these disruptions with a greater sense of urgency. And third, work hard to have the right impact and be ready to pivot quickly. Now, one of the best resources I know of for understanding the current trends in human capital is the annual Deloitte Global Human Capital Trends Survey. This annual survey includes responses from almost 9,000 HR leaders from across the world. This year's report, titled The Social Enterprise at Work, Paradox as a Path Forward, presents some surprising statistics, as described in a section in the report titled A Memo to HR. Listen to one of the following statements from the report. It states, despite the progress being made, global respondents to the survey reported a 64-point gap between importance and readiness, with 75% saying the evolving role of HR was important or very important for their success over the next 12 to 18 months, but only 11% saying they were ready to address this trend. That finding leads us to ask a fundamental question. Given the growing importance of the human element at work and the continued gap in HR readiness, will HR remain as a distinct function, or has 10 years of progress been overshadowed by a persistent view that HR may never get there, signaling the end of HR as we know it? And this section of the report concludes with, there is no doubt that change is coming, but we believe it needs to be more than transformation or reinvention or even revolution. It needs to be foundational, and that's where the real story begins. So we think that the kind of movement that HR needs is in the challenging landscape of work of the future will require HR to address some key challenges. Then the Deloitte study identifies 2 significant barriers to that. The way in which HR is typically structured and HR's general lack of alignment with the areas where the biggest impact can be made. So the report identifies the biggest challenges that HR should make to maximize its impact. They include the following: increase new capabilities by adopting a new mindset, embracing new traits and behaviors that can help the enterprise to thrive in the digital age. Secondly, change the HR organization design to incorporate more agile and team-based behaviors that can create a new lens, adopting an operating model that enables HR to flex based on dynamic business needs. Third, increase the efficiency through which HR activities occur through automation. They can do this by adopting enablers, deploying advanced technology to promote productivity and value and simplify the experience. And fourth, expand the expectations and stature of HR leaders by elevating their focus, driving tangible, measurable value across the enterprise. So by expanding the scope of influence, the area of focus to effectively manage the human elements of work, HR leaders drive the move away from the traditional HR model to create what the study states is exponential HR, the place where it is perceived to have the greatest impact on the organization and is a true strategic partner in the enterprise. So our Agile HR leadership model is focused on helping HR leaders reach the exponential space for their organization. It starts by knowing where they are now and helping them to get to where they want to be. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Wayne, who will now talk a little more specifically and in more detail about the elements of our program.
Thank you, Steve. Before I forget, if you could in the chat room, just tell us who you are, what company you're from. It'd be nice to get to know you. We want to view this as a conversation between us and you, and just kind of at that. And if you have any questions, we'll have some time at the end to really respond to your questions. So if anything comes up that you want to know more about, just feel free to enter it in the chat room. Thank you. Okay. So I've always been someone who's been curious ever since a little boy. My earliest remembrance are putting things together, models, and playing with lot blocks and stuff like that. I've always been curious. I've always been someone who's kind of willing to figure out how to do something, and it's just part of my DNA. And so in my career throughout HR, I was always involved in new things. Sometimes they were valued, many times they were not, but I was always someone who was willing to push the envelope. Got involved in a lot of HR technology. Most were unsuccessful, some were successful, but I was increasingly frustrated with all the effort we put into a project and it didn't go anywhere. And I'm sure everybody in this call, in this session has seen that, where you've worked hours and hours on a project you've been told is really important. You meet periodically once a week, you get calls in the middle of the night, you really work on it, then all of a sudden the project dies, it doesn't go anywhere, or nothing changes. And it's frustrating. And, I experienced that many times, and I said to myself, how do we get around this? And so fortunately for me, I guess 2011, I took a slight career diversion. I went into IT. Now, like in many organizations, they tell you one thing, but when you're there, you find out something different. I was told it was going to be a lot of HR, a little of IT. Well, it turned out to be a little bit of HR and a lot of IT. And I was working with many programmers, many from, I guess, Hyderabad, Vizag, which our company focused on. And I struggled a little bit, but eventually I got it. I became a Scrum Master, which is a kind of project leader in an Agile environment. And we were able to develop some pretty big, substantial software. This is for a product called Brass Ring, which is owned by IBM, a small international company of 300,000 employees. But I enjoyed the work. And then I realized, we were taking some very, very complex technology and business requirements and really successfully building software. And I said, this Agile stuff works. Is there a way that we can adopt it to the HR space? And so for the next 5 years, I really figured, I really struggled. How can we take this into, the HR space? And I would tell people about that, and their eyes would roll at me, and they look at me like I was crazy. I mean, Agile's for IT. It's not for HR. I mean, get real. And, I didn't really want to believe that. And so I really kind of thought about what are the core elements of Agile that we can take and apply to a business sense that you don't need to be a programmer or a technical person, but the concepts are there. And as I thought about that, again, I mentioned I'm a builder, I really came up with some key ideas that I thought made some sense. And so then, how do you market it? How do you sell people? And I had Steve knows I had these weird acronyms. I had the House of Agile. I spent all this time on things. And again, I still got the blank stares and people would roll their eyes. And, I realized you need some kind of context. How can people put this in a context that they're comfortable with and they understand? And so one day I was listening, I was working for IBM at the time. I was watching financial news and the CEO, Ginny Rometty, came on and she was talking about EBITDA. I said, EBITDA, earnings before income taxes, depreciation, amortization. And for some reason it was kind of like out of the blue, I had an epiphany that why don't we put all the trends and the themes I had seen into the context of EBITDA? And that came as the foundation for what I did. And so I went to Steve's class and I presented that. And as thankful to Steve, it was students were engaged and they really got into it. And then as we started putting our course together, we realized that, Agile is a new way of working that requires an element of leadership to be successful. It's not going to work unless you have strong leadership. So as we were preparing this course, there's a graduate course, Organizational Dynamics at University of Pennsylvania, Steve came across this book called Strategic Doing, which had some great ideas around how leaders can facilitate an agile environment for their organization. So this was kind of a transformative for both of us that we said let's combine these two. And so these two books form the foundation of what we're about to do. So let me talk a little bit more about some details around that. So EBITDA is my version of so if we can measure the financial health of an organization, the EBITDA, we can certainly measure the agile health of an organization. And so let me go through these fairly quickly. Experimentation, not perfection, is the focus. We in HR have been taught to get it right the first time. We got to do things the same way, and that's not going to work anymore in this kind of environment. And so, you all in your own situations had a great experiment in March of transforming your entire organizations, taking people who were based in the office and moving them into their homes. A massive transformation, a massive experimentation. You didn't expect to get it right. You figured you'd do it and then fix it. And that's exactly the strategy. And so going forward, that's the key element of what we talk about. The second thing is B, in breaking down big things, big problems, projects into smaller components. We'll talk about that later. That applies to meetings and planning and communicating. It's just really, you want to take something big and break it down into smaller pieces. Why? So you can do some incremental improvements. Agile HR is doing a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit there until it scales. That's really the foundation. And then time. Typically, we have projects go on forever and there's no real time controls or, things kind of go off the deep end. We run out of scope. We change the scope. And so Agile HR really focuses on some time commitments, 2 to 3 week blocks of time where we do a piece of the project and the next block of time we do another piece of the project. The second T is teams, promoting self-guided teams. Now, self-guided teams has been around for a while, the concept. But Agile looks a little differently. It talks about some structure. It talks about key roles. But the reality is self-guided teams really are a key component of Agile and really can produce significant results. That goes hand in hand with that is developing servant leadership. We actually call teams and leadership shared leadership, but you need a leader who's willing to kind of step back and be the facilitator, be part of the team, offer guidance, but not really direct the team. That's a key element of that. I think the last thing that's probably most important is always be engaging customers. I can't tell you how many times we talked to an organization where an HR leader said, we spent hours on this project and it looked great. We checked with our consultants outside. It was phenomenal. And then they tried to deploy it inside and everybody didn't really use it. It didn't really go anywhere. Why? Because they didn't really look at their customers, their internal customers, their stakeholders, the managers, the employees. And so the critical element of Agile HR is to really be communicating on a regular basis with your customers so that the things you're doing satisfy their requirements, not just HR's. Okay, as I mentioned before, this was the EBITDA side, and as Steve and I evolved, we focused more on the strategic doing. And I'm not going to go through all of these, and a lot of them are self-explanatory, but just let me focus on a couple. Create and maintain a safe environment for deep, focused conversations. Can't stress this more. Can't stress anymore. We really need to have an environment where people feel comfortable talking. There's obviously certain cultural elements of this, depending on where you live in the world. But the key is really to foster an environment where people want to tell you things that sometimes you want to hear and sometimes you don't want to hear. The only way to be successful is to hear things that you may not want to hear, but are important to your success. And so you need to have a comfort level. You need to create some courage and confidence that people can do that. The second thing is frame the conversation with the right questions. Typically, leaders we talk to try to validate what they're doing. So they ask the question that generates exactly the answer they want. That's not going to work long term, especially in a COVID environment, especially with disruptions. You need to expand your view of the world. You need to expand alternative views of things. And so you have to ask the right kind of questions. And we use something called appreciative inquiry, which kind of focuses on the positive. The second thing is identify your assets, including hidden ones. All of us in this room here, we have a certain set of assets. Typically, it's like an iceberg. An iceberg, a little bit floats above the surface. Most of it floats below the surface. And in our organizations, we typically only tap into the above surface of people's capabilities. There's a lot more below the surface that we could use that could be helpful to us that we never get to. So part of what you're doing is how do you tap into those hidden assets to really help them make yourself more successful? Looking for the Big Easy, it's really Big Easy's decision framework. It really helps you decide what things to work on. And that's really important when you're starting any initiative is, when you work on something that you think you can do and actually has a big impact. And so the big is the big impact, and easy is something that is relatively easy to do. And so the last element is number 7 is start slowly to go fast, but start. I can't tell how many leaders we've talked to about, they're trying to get it perfect before they get started. Well, if that ever happens, you're never going to be perfect, so you never get started. So we believe, as with experimentation, it's important to kind of get started so that you can kind of make some progress. I'm curious if you could in the chat room, if any of these kind of appeal to you in terms of what resonates with you, what you think makes the most sense. And again, we'll have these slides available at the end. If people want to get a copy of it, let us know. But I'm just curious if you think about these, just take a second to, which kind of resonates with you in the chat room. All right, so essentially, we took these 7 and 10 and created them into one. We call it a force multiplier. It's by combining these 17 principles, you really get a force multiplier, something that really helps accelerate what you need to do. Okay. So solution. So on the one hand, we had these 7 EBITDA principles and 10 strategic doing. We talked about other key elements of leadership. How do we make this all work? There's a lot of things there. And we decided that we would create what we call a modular program that we could focus on customizing according to the individual, according to the organization. It doesn't matter whether you're a 5-person company or a 500,000-person company. These key elements of what we're doing can really form the basis of a workable solution that works for you. And so the key is how do you put them all together? And we'll talk about that a little bit later. The first step we talk about it, and we'll offer this to people at the end, is we have what we call an Agile Readiness Survey. It really looks at your organization, and it helps you to figure out, are you ready for Agile, and where you might have some gaps. And anybody who wants to get a copy of that, we'll free to lend it to you. So again, how do you put all this together in a way that makes sense? So Steve, you want to take us through the creating the right mindset for this?
Sure. Just move on the slides, please, if you will. So Wayne correctly identified that the challenge here was taking the 17 elements of this program and putting them into a cohesive way that organizations could then use in a way to advance Agile thinking in their organizations, particularly within the HR function. So we decided to see if we needed to see if there was a way, how do we operationalize these ideas and make it effective? And we learned that it really starts with a mindset. And the mindset of the leader is critically important because they're the one who are leading this thing. And we've identified at least 4 phases of approach to Agile HR leadership. And the first one is diagnosing and deciding exactly what it is that needs to be done, and understanding the business case for the effort and how and what it is that needs to be accomplished in the context of that. And so our survey helps to understand where there are opportunities to find that. But we really find that having deep conversations with leaders involved in the process helps us to understand where the greatest opportunities are. The second aspect of the mindset of the leader is being an active agent of change. Initially, we realized that change initiatives in organizations are often hard. Not everybody in the organization sees change in the same way. So we find that the mindset of the leader needs to be an active agent of change, understanding how the dynamics of change impact people, who's ready to be very renewed and excited about the change versus other people who have to have more convincing. So being adept at understanding change, the dynamics of change, understanding why we should bother and how we should proceed. Then once we've got those things clear, then we move into what we call the implementer of action. And this is sort of the boots on the ground approach, where you actually get into the work and you've assembled the right people, you've decided exactly what the project is, you understand how it's being conceptualized from a change perspective, and now you're ready to jump in and do some of the work itself. And we start by looking at creating win-win situations, building energy, trying to create some momentum, staying on track and keeping the score. And lastly, the fourth area is the reflective learner. That Wayne talked earlier about this being a culture of experimentation. And it's really important to have that notion, but it's also important to stop along the road once in a while and look back and seeing how are we doing? Are we able to integrate this learning? Are we moving in the direction that we need to be? And are we building resilience as leaders in the organization? So that reflective learner is a very important high-level understanding of the elements of implementing this Agile HR leadership program. The next area is we no matter what program we're doing with, whether it's a small organization or a large organization, we find that these elements here that are on the screen are critically important. And the two that are in green are really cultural, organizational culture. And sometimes we have to spend a little bit more time in getting these two elements, essential elements, inclusive in an organization before we're able to do some of the others. So let me just quickly go through what some of these are. The first is this area of experimentation. Experimentation is really important because it gives us the opportunity to learn quickly and to fail fast, but it's also a way to sort of open up the potential of your organization. If your organization encourages experimentation, there's a certain level of openness. It allows people to be somewhat playful, and I find it to be very motivational, right? So if you have a culture of experimentation, you have a necessary ingredient to help your organization learn and grow fast, and it creates some openness, playfulness, and motivation. The second area is inclusivity. Organizations that adopt this method really need to be inclusive. They need to be able to get the right people in the room, create a sense of belonging for them, but also make everybody's voices important and heard. So leading inclusively is a really important core component of no matter what program you're going to do. And then we move more onto some of the boots on the ground thing. You heard Wayne talk about the hidden assets. It gives us the opportunity to tap into people's deeper motivations. As Wayne said, a lot of people in organizations only get to use a fraction of what they really care about in the workplace. How do you tap into that other stuff that they might have that would help them to bring purpose and meaning to their work and give them a greater sense of accomplishment and engagement in a project opportunity because they're bringing greater use of their skills and their hidden talents to things. We also find that no matter what we do, breaking things down from the large concepts to smaller pieces is really critically important. We focus on incremental changes. And the value of that is it often provides clarity and understanding because people are not moving faster than their capability to absorb what they're learning. And you heard Wayne talk about the importance of framing questions. This is so critically important that we, by asking the right questions and using a technique to bring more disconfirming information, we help to get a better aspect of the context of the problem, and it also helps to align the action. And then finally, deciding what's next. Somebody has to take the responsibility to keep things moving. So how do we keep the everyone moving in the right direction? And we do that through the quality and the power of our decision making, as well as our ability to create momentum for the next stage of the process. So those two things are really important elements: the mindset of the leader and the HR leadership cycle. And no matter what level of program you might be doing in this area, these things are hallmarks of what actually goes on. What happens next, though, are more some of the liberating structures. And I think, Wayne, you're going to talk a little bit about some of the boots on the ground types of initiatives that people need to pay attention to.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that Steve and I discovered through this process is that, you know, most change initiatives don't work because they don't really focus on behaviors. You know, whereas Agile focused on behaviors that are observable. And we thought about how people work on a daily basis. And is there a way that we can inculcate some of these methods into the way they work? And I think that's really the only way you're going to be able to change people. You know, typically a large change program, you're asking for people to change dramatically in the things they do and who they report to. And I don't think that's really going to work. Our focus is on taking the mindset, taking these modules and focusing on how people do their jobs every day. So if we can help people be more productive in most of their day, then but that by definition makes them more agile and makes them more effective and makes the organization more responsive. And so let's talk about all these real quickly. You know, you've been to those meetings where the only thing that changes week to week is the due dates. Nothing gets done. People checking their phones, not anybody in this call, of course. You know, people just kind of tuning out. It's even worse in a virtual environment. People may be looking at their screen, but they're doing other things. They may be, you know, chatting with someone or texting and you know, but meetings we found are really painful, almost like root canal. They don't really accomplish as much as they could be. How we communicate, leaders are inundated with communications. They have way too much information. Example, we talked to a leader who was really frustrated. She came to us and said, you know, I spent hours on this PowerPoint presentation. It was perfect. I got feedback from consultants. I really loved it. I gave it to my leader and, you know, they looked at it for a second and filed it away. I never heard from them again. Well, you know, we explained to her that, you know, your leader, you were the fourth meeting that day and the previous three people had given him another 30-page deck. And so he now has, you know, 4 30-page decks to review, and he's overwhelmed. He can't remember the last meeting two people ago when he's talking to you. And so how we communicate is often a challenge. How we plan. Geez, if you created a plan on February 1st, by March 15th, it was obsolete. We tend to plan, you know, you're coming to the end of the year now, you're going to start planning for 2021. Which can't happen soon enough, right, for all of us. But, you know, things change so quickly that a plan you start in January 1st may be obsolete a month or two later. And so Agile HR looks at to reduce that a little bit. How do we leverage time? Well, you know, we spend these time on projects that go on forever. And, you know, we meet on a regular basis. We involve consultants. At the very end, we don't accomplish much. And people lose energy. We found that the longer it takes to finish something, the less likely the customer is going to want it because things change so much. So we'll talk about that. How we assign work. Typically, we focus on job descriptions rather than skills. We assign people to teams because, well, you know, we want representation, but it doesn't work out. Things don't get done. And the same thing with teams. We want to get all the stakeholders. We have people, large teams that don't get anything done, and we get frustrated. So these are clearly the way that work is currently done in the organization. That's inefficient and ineffective. So let's talk about how Agile HR can help in all these areas. First, Agile typically revolves shorter meetings 15-minute meetings every day instead of 2-hour meetings on an ongoing basis. You ask 3 questions: what did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? And what's getting in the way? And so what happens? You identify problems. If you had a weekly meeting that you only heard about problems, it would take you several weeks to identify the problem, let alone solve it. But with daily short frequency meetings, you find out about problems the next day. And so you solve things just more quickly. It's a better way to keep people up to date. People know what's going on and they're accountable. If you have a meeting every day, you have to report back on what you've been doing. You're more likely to do things so that you don't want to report back, well, I didn't get to it. That's a little bit of a no-no. And so there's some pressure around that to kind of make that better. Again, we don't believe in long, complex PowerPoint presentations. Yes, if an executive buys into your concept, you have to provide some documentation. But we believe in writing less, focusing on executive summaries, 1 to 2 pages that present your key facts and arguments that the executive who's seen 30 other pages from 5 other people can really dive into and resonate with them and get their buy-in. And of course, that helps reduce scope creep. Okay. Again, the longer a project, the longer you plan, the more likely it's not going to be successful. There's more risk. And so by focusing on shorter increments, you reduce risk. You're more adaptive. If things change, you can respond. You're not stuck in a path and a direction that can't be mid-course corrected. And Agile, because we're meeting and communicating, we can find out those things that are getting in the way and make some adjustments. We can track how we're doing. Agile has something called a Kanban board where you have a visual representation of where you are. So it's easy to see where things are, and it provides more resilience when people kind of see plans happening and that they're more engaged. They're more committed to the process. Much more shorter time horizons on Agile. They're called sprints, typically 2 to 3 week blocks of time. Where we remember in the EBITDA, we break things down and we do incremental iterative improvements. So we do them with a 2 to 3 week period. Some people call them minimal viable products. Some people call them deliverables, but we're basically developing a chunk of something bigger each week. And then we're going to build it the next sprint, and then the next sprint, and the next sprint. And that's really how you make quantum improvements, is by doing things incrementally. You have more successes. Imagine people, every 2-3 weeks celebrating, we did something, let's go out, have some pizza or whatever, let's celebrate that. You don't get that when you have a long-term project where you don't see any light at the end of the tunnel and people get frustrated. How do we assign work? We want to leverage knowledge, skills, and abilities. We don't do that in job titles. Job title is composed of lots of things, and not everybody has all the skills that are required. And so we really, as we look at breaking down things in Agile HR, we want to focus on those things. Again, we want to focus on incremental work. That leads to quantum change. That's how it's designed to do that. And how we organize teams. Again, teams have to be hyper-inclusive. We want to make sure that we have people from all sorts of experiences, all different backgrounds, so that using their hidden assets to break down silos, we can be more successful. So any one of these, actually, as you think about it, all these can really be helpful to an organization. But let's pick meeting. Just imagine if you were to change the way you meet to make them more productive. That will have an acceleration effect in an organization. So our view of Agile, you don't need the whole thing. You don't need to use all the melons. But if we change some of the way we work, we can have exponential improvements. All right. I'm just curious, in the chat room, any of these resonate with you? Is there any of these you think would be easier to do in your own organization? Let me just see if we have any comments there. If you could take a minute, just kind of put your comments down there.
Wayne, while people do that, I might just have a comment on the communication one.
Yeah.
Because I found this to be one of the areas of critical improvement, just in the way in which we communicate. One of the problems with business communication is very often the illusion that it has taken place, and so we find that by more precisely calibrating communication and whittling it down to a more bite-sized kind of information that people can absorb quickly is far better than overwhelming information, as Wayne said, with very long and lengthy PowerPoint presentations. So the notion of trying to almost break down communication in smaller chunks is far more transformational, and I think it certainly helps people to learn faster and retain information more appropriately when we communicate differently in some of the projects that we do. And I see somebody likes the daily stand-up quick meets. That's
Yep.
exactly right. I think the meetings, how we meet, is a really critically important component of this. And we think of these things as in terms of sort of liberating structures for the organization, that if we just change the way that you meet on a regular basis, you might find some real power in that.
Exactly. Yep. All right. Again, keep adding your comments there. And if you have any questions, we come into the soon to the end of our presentation. We certainly love to spend a lot of time asking your specific questions, how we can be helpful to you.
So what we tried to describe for you is sort of a system of thinking, the way in which Agile is applied. It starts with the mindset, and then we look at the sort of the structures that are needed to make it work, and then specifically the dynamics of the work being done in your organization. And by really understanding all of that before we begin, we really get to what we call the systemic processes. We understand what are the elements that we need to assemble from the 17 principles that work in the context of the work that you have. So blending of those tactics adapted from the Agile, then integrated with leadership strategies, and then teaching people how to use those skills and integrate them into the organization. And we find that when we do this kind of thing, it really builds some energy. There's the engagement level and commitment level of people involved in projects tends to go up exponentially, potentially transformational, because people are really working differently and enjoying each other's company. And I think working in a far more inclusive arena these days is a lot of what people seek for in an organization. They want to be feeling like they belong, feel like they can contribute beyond the daily things that they bring to the workplace. And I think that they provide practices that can help to break through performance, regardless of what employees are working on. So all of the things that I think we desire from the work that we do on a regular basis, and I think by the assembling of these practices in your organization, I think we really help to get to that, what the Deloitte report identified as the exponential HR, right? Moving from traditional model to a far more engaged model where people are really contributing significantly, have a sense of belonging, and we're really making a strategic impact on the organization. So we do have a free tool that we can make available to you. It's the Agile Readiness Survey. It's your sort of central starting place. If you're interested in doing these types of things, you just complete that, and it's a very simple, straightforward. It gives you a sense of whether or not you are where you might be on the continuum of starting for Agile, and that helps us to decide where the interventions might need to be. So with that, I think we'll hand it back to Pallavi.
And let's see if we have any questions. Yeah.
Questions, yeah.
Pallavi, I think if people want to get a copy of that, should they just email you, or can they put their name in the chat? What do you think makes sense procedurally?
I think, if they can just put their email IDs here, we'll figure out a way of sending that across to them.
Okay.
I see Nicole has indicated that breaking down the work assigned resonated with her. And so that, again, it's just another great technique, Nicole. Being able to break things down into smaller parts really does resonate. You can think about any complex problem that we might face in organizations. Breaking things down into smaller parts really helps us to get a much better understanding of what it is that we have to be attentive to.
So I have a question which I'll ask the two of you, and I think looking at you spoke about things are changing and now things are things are becoming different. So in your perspective, from the last couple of months, when you've been seeing so many changes happening in organizations, because of the pandemic and because many people are changing the way they work. Are you seeing people asking for a different perspective? Are you seeing are the conversations changing? What are you seeing happening?
Absolutely. I think that we are seeing a tremendous shift in that. So many organizations, particularly here in the United States, and I guess throughout the world, many were not prepared quite for the impact that the pandemic would have. And what we realized was that organizations really had to outsource their strategy to the people that were involved in their organizations, because they didn't have all of the answers. And so we found that the level of thinking has gone up considerably in terms of learning to be more agile, learning to be adaptive, to pivot on the point, to be able to come up with quick solutions to problems and to experiment. So we're finding quite an increase already in some of the tools of Agile, and people are doing it rather naturally because they're forced into a situation where they have to do it. I think the key is to sort of be ready to do this without being forced to do it. It's never good to learn from a crisis. It's always better to prepare for the next one and have an ability to know that you have the infrastructure to support a future hit to your organization or disruption, and be ready for that to occur rather than to have to find your way through it once it happens.
Yeah.
So we like the idea of building that capability in organizations, so that this has been a great lesson, and many people have sort of struggled from it. But preparing for future disruptions, I think, is critical.
Yeah.
And that's the ongoing challenge many organizations are going to have. I mean, they made a lot of sacrifices, did a lot of good things to move everybody, out of the office. Yeah. Now, what do? Do you instill all these practices as part of your ongoing way of working, or do you fall back to the old ways? We know that by being more agile, you really created some more responsive agility in the organization. So what happens when the next crisis comes? And there'll be another crisis, disruption. Are you going to have to repeat everything, start from the beginning, or are you going to be able to kind of use some of the learnings from this to move forward? And I think that's sustaining this flexibility and agile thinking is going to be critical for HR leaders versus falling back into the normal patterns of status quo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great question, Pallavi.
Yeah. Yes. I was curious. Let me ask in terms of the culture, obviously there's culture nuances, the U.S., India. Does this agile thinking in terms of experimentation, is that inclusiveness? Is that part of the culture there? Does that make sense? Is it a nuance? I just kind of wanted to learn that for myself.
Yeah, so I'll also invite people to type in their comments from their experiences. But I think, we are talking about inclusiveness. We are talking, right, about, I think in many organizations, leaders are looking at how do they engage better. What we are hearing in the last couple of months is also how people are, how will leaders engage in a virtual environment when, when I think a lot of times we heard it in one or two of our earlier sessions is where the traditional supervisory manager way is something that people are realizing that that would not work anymore, and therefore those dialogues are also happening. So I think it's very similar to what you see happening in the US.
Okay.
And I think, yes, Amit is also saying the same thing, that principles would apply to all cultures. I think it's true. I think some of the boundaries, I think, are getting a little merged now. You don't see such vast differences.
Yeah, the reason I asked that question is we're working with a client in Japan, and that running into a lot of resistance with changing role of HR in the organization, tend to be more hierarchical. And I was just kind of curious because obviously, we have to be sensitive to the environment and the culture that we work in. And it may be, specific, different in each organization. So thank you for that.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think one overriding issue for me in this whole thing is that, no matter what culture you might be in, people want to feel that they have value in the work that they do, right? We spend so much of our time in our workplaces. We want to make sure that our workplaces are places where we can really use our skills and talents and capabilities to the best effect and feel that we belong to the organization. And I think that's a universal sense of feeling that people want, no matter what culture you might be in. You want to feel that you are really being able to bring your very best self to work, and that you can get involved in things that are interesting and engaging to you, and that you can make a contribution. And I think those are universal principles of our work lives. And so we try to embed in the principles of Agile the notion that, human beings are pretty similar across the world when it comes to what they want from their workplace.
Yeah.
And like what Jayesh said, a mind that's set to change. Mindset, that's really nice. Putting the words there.
That's a very good. That's great.
We're going to borrow that, Jayesh.
I love it.
So thank you.
Yes, I love it. It's really. Yeah, and there's from Sudhir that during the crisis time is we need to have more frequent short-term planning. Agile practices will be critical. I guess for some time, 5 years long planning will not make sense, and that's exactly what we're finding, Sudhir, is the notion that we have a meeting on a Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock, and we keep it short, and we have a meeting 3 or 4 days later, and we check in on, and chances are pretty good that something has changed in that planning cycle. So shortening those planning cycles, making the meetings more impactful, but doing them more frequently is really critically important, particularly as people are disenfranchised from their organizations, isolated from their colleagues, and the potential for misunderstanding and miscommunication, because we are so fragmented, is actually significantly more likely to happen. So those shorter duration but more frequent conversations about the work is so critically important.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't, unless you have a crystal ball, you really can't predict the future. You can only get ready for it and improve the way you respond to it. And so to me, many organizations are embracing that and realizing that, we just have to get agile and responsive. That's our goal. That's our long-term plan. We can't really predict. We just have to have increased capabilities, capacity to respond to whatever comes our way.
Yeah.
And I think the assembly of these tools, which are not difficult to learn, actually helps to unleash the potential in your organization, right? That's really what we want. We want people to have that sense of liberating themselves in their organization to be really effective and driving for great results. And what organization doesn't want great results?
Exactly. We had a session on Monday with CHROs around, how do you get the hearts and minds of employees? Which kind of brought home to us that it really is, the leadership element of Agile can't be overlooked. Yes, you can do meetings, communicate, but you need leaders who kind of embrace the tactics, who create a visceral connection to employees, who want to drive behavior change. So, no one has the answers, but it's really critical for those in leadership role is to really, how can you engage your employees? How can you make them feel part of it? And how do you capture their hearts and minds that can really drive these changes? So as you're thinking about Agile, great, you want to love to, focus on our dynamic ways of working, but there's still an element of leadership involved that needs to be present in everything you do. So don't, gravitate towards the principles and not the leadership practices. They only work when they're together.
Right. Yeah. Yes. So we have, 2 more comments. Integrative thinking, and the next one is about how do we build and make products and make business. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the key things that Wayne just identified there, that the integration of the EBITDA with the leadership practices is an opportunity for leaders to step up and model a new way of working in organizations. And I think that's also something critically important. Is about it's a new form of leadership in many ways. It's less command and control, that we are often used to, and particularly the steeply hierarchical organizations often have a hard time letting go of responsibility at the leadership level and prefer to make it at the top and then push things down through the organization and expect everybody to comply. But with agile leadership principles, modeling the way differently, it's more of an invitation to lead than it is a command to lead. And you're inviting people into that space and to problem solve collectively rather than leading it from the very, very top. So that's why that cultural overlay of experimentation and inclusivity is so critically important as essential elements to have to make it work, because a steeply hierarchical organization that has a ken to want to be making all of the decisions from the top is not going to adapt agile very easily. It needs to break that structure free a little bit in order for it to take hold in the organization.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
What other questions? Any comments?
No, there are some comments.
Okay.
I think I don't know. Can you do you want me to read them? I think.
Yeah.
So there is one which talks about it's imperative to build agile leadership capabilities and inclusive leadership at large to ensure the business continuity and better world for everyone. This comes from a person called Yashwant Chavan. And the next one is here up on the screen.
I think also that there's the whole change management component of that. We didn't spend a whole lot of time on that today, but as part of our course, Agile, being the Agile HR leader as agent of change is really critical. And Steve has numerous models that he's developed. And we can't emphasize enough that if you're going to adopt Agile, you need to focus on the change behavior aspect of it too. How do you get people to, buy into it? We call it opt-in, not buy it. How to make people they're not forced to work. They want to, and they opt into what you're doing. And so that's a critical element of that. A lot of companies, again, focus on the technical aspect, but leadership and change management are just as important.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
All right.
And again, last comment. Agile HR is not industry specific. It can apply to any industry, any function. It's not just HR. We're talking to some companies about finance and accounting and procurement. It's really the same principles of, in finance, they have those daily meetings, weekly meetings, and procurement, they have those long meetings and never get anything done. And so it's not just HR. So those of you that have a larger scope in your practice, that you're responsible for the entire organization, I would also start thinking about Agile, not just in HR, but throughout other areas. Find those key leaders who are willing to embrace these topics and try it out there. I think it's, we don't want to exclusively think that Agile is just for HR or IT. It can be used throughout the organization.
Yeah.
That's a critical point, Ray, because Wayne and I have a strong bias towards HR because that's where we spent most of our professional experience. But what reality is that in today's environment, HR as a partner in an organization needs people from other places. It needs help from accounting. It needs help from marketing. So the opportunity for applying this across the entire enterprise, not just within HR, also exists. So it can be applied just to an HR role, but it can also be applied to a more enterprise-wide strategic initiative for bigger initiatives where HR is the facilitator of this process and drives it for the organization, but you're involving people from other functional areas of your organization and teaching them the tools and techniques as well.
Yeah.
So it can be, but we love HR. That's where I spend a lot of my time in my professional life, and it's how Wayne and I got connected in the first place through our love of working in an HR space and the important work that we all do in organizations for HR. And I think, if HR doesn't own the responsibility of the employee experience, then nobody else is going to. So you can be the leader, but you can also invite other people to join you in the journey.
Yes. Okay, so I think we don't have any comments or questions anymore. So,
Okay.
I'd just like to take this opportunity to really thank you, Wayne and Steve. And I think, for demystifying Agile, because I think a lot of times people look at it from a very technology focused perspective. And to see
Indeed.
how we can apply it as HR leaders or leaders in any other function, and really take it down to using it in our engagement and in our, as one of the tools that we use in our leadership capabilities. So thank you very much.
Thank
Once
you.
again for joining and spending this time with us. I'd also once again like to thank I Am Bangalore for their support with NHRD Bangalore. Thank you. And all of you for attending this session. We are looking forward to meeting all of you again this Saturday when we have our session with the entrepreneurs, and then on November 27th and 28th for our HR showcase. Please look out for the registration details, which will be coming soon. We will share the slides on the email IDs that have been shared, and we'll also share them on our WhatsApp groups if you're a part of that. So that's another place where we will share it. So please look for that. And thank you everyone for joining.
One thing.
Yes.
Steve and I hope this is the beginning of many conversations with the group here, where this is not one and done. We're passionate around Agile HR. We evangelize it, and so we're hopeful that this is just the start of a numerous association with you guys. And we're here if you have any questions, any concerns. We're advocates, and we want to be helpful. So just keep us in touch. Keep in touch if you need anything.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Steve. Thank
you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Right. So, yes, Sudhir has said that please share email of Wayne and Stephen if it's okay. Yes, I think it's there on your PowerPoint presentation also, right?
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. So we will share it.
Cool.
Thank you.
That's okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Have a good evening,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.